This year was meant to be the start of something big for Williams. The biggest regulation change in F1 history presented the perfect opportunity to take a big step forward towards World Championship glory in the near future. Instead, it's been a rude awakening. Everyone at Williams talked up the importance of 2026 incessantly last year, with good cause. Since being bought by American investment firm Doralton Capital in August 2020 after the Williams family was forced to sell up after a long, painful decline, the team has made good progress until now. And according to Carlos Sainz, that shows how far Williams really is from the top teams in terms of its capabilities. Last year was a tremendous success, with Williams taking 5th in the Constructors' Championship. As team principal James Vowles said a year ago, 2025 wasn't about the now, it was about prioritising the long term. That was what he described as the way to win. This doesn't mean Williams was expecting race wins in 2026, that was always a bridge too far, but it was about taking the next step from its midfield leading baseline of last year. It's why Williams poured almost all of its aerodynamic research and development time last year into the 2026 car. The first version of it went into the wind tunnel at the start of January 25. Therefore, being lumbered with the 9th fastest car that scored just 2 points in the first 3 events and is languishing off the back of the midfield is very far from that master plan. So what's gone so wrong? The world started to get wind of the trouble Williams was in even before the announcement that it was not ready for the first pre-season test in Barcelona. Rumours of crash test problems and being overweight by as much as 30 kilograms, worth 9/10 of a second per lap even by the most conservative estimates, spread like wildfire. And they were at least partly accurate. Although Williams did eventually pass all the mandatory crash tests, the countermeasures required have instead contributed to the weight problem. But there were also problems with the manufacturing of parts falling behind due to Williams' internal systems being overloaded by a car Vowles described as 3 times more complicated than anything it had built before. Williams is a team that is trying to catch up with the big outfits after years of underinvestment. Williams' takeover by Doralton Capital, along with the wider financial changes such as a cost cap, the more equitable distribution of prize money, and F1's boom, has allowed it to invest. One of the key changes was in terms of internal planning and communication systems, enterprise resource planning as it's known, and it's clear these systems have had problems given the load of building an all-new car to new rules. Playing catch-up has led to compromises that have also added weight. Even by the last race in Japan, the weight disadvantage is understood to have been around 28 kilos. The good news for Williams is that it is set to take a big step towards rectifying that with upgrades for the next event in Miami. That means performance should improve in Miami, given taking weight off is guaranteed lap time. However, it would be unrealistic to assume Williams will get down to its ideal weight target, which would be below the minimum 768 kilos, so you can use a little ballast to optimise weight distribution within the permitted window. What's more, all this comes at a cost. Money spent on rectifying this situation and changes to get the car on track in the first place will have impacted the development budget. Weight isn't Williams' only problem. Sainz admits that the aerodynamic package is not good enough, saying at Suzuka that the gap to the front and even the head of the midfield is not all down to weight. Considering it finished 5th last year, sacrificing 2025 development for 2026 was the right decision. The only question mark is whether further aerodynamic research on the 25 car might have given the team knowledge that would have improved the Williams FW48, but there's no way to test that suggestion. However, the biggest problem outside of the weight relates to the mechanical characteristics of the car and how these can also negatively impact the aerodynamic performance. Williams has run with the most rake of any F1 team in 2026. High rake means the rear is higher than the front of the car, effectively tilting it slightly forward to increase the angle of attack of aero surfaces and therefore improve downforce levels. The downside is that you need to ensure you have good control of the mechanical platform so that both the downforce and the aero centre of pressure are where you want them. However, the car's troubles cannot simply be blamed on the rake level. That's because of a long-standing weakness rearing its head, which Alex Albon describes as the car three-wheeling. Three-wheeling is when the car lifts one tyre off the ground in a corner. As Albon explains, the wheel is not literally in the air, but it is lifting slightly from the track surface. This means a reduced tyre contact patch, compromising mechanical grip and disrupting the overall platform and therefore aero performance. That means less grip and a car that can be unpredictable. The inside rear tyre usually suffers in such circumstances, but Albon says Williams has been afflicted by this at both the front and the rear, depending on the corner type. Identifying the root cause is difficult, but excessive roll stiffness and aggressive ride height could be factors during high load transfer. As this is a problem that dogged Williams throughout the previous rules cycle, it's likely to be a reflection of blind spots with its simulation tools. Whatever the cause, it's a common characteristic of this lineage of Williams cars. It's one that Sainz noticed as soon as he first tested for the team at the post-season test in Abu Dhabi in 2024. Williams runs pull rod suspension at the front and push rod at the rear, the only team to choose that combination in 2026. Williams uses the Mercedes gearbox and rear suspension, which appear to work well for the works team, but the front suspension is its own design and build. That's a piece of work Vowles spoke proudly of as very different pre-season, with the top wishbone forward leg mounted high and the rear leg low. If suspension changes are needed to combat the problem, it's most likely to be at the front, but given it's been a persistent Williams concern over a period of years, it's reasonable to conclude it doesn't entirely understand the source of the problem, even though the symptoms are clear. Williams has probably the strongest driver lineup in F1's midfield in the combination of Albon and Sainz, but you wouldn't blame them for having their confidence in the team's project shaken by how this year has started. Sainz has described it as a shock. While he always knew there would be bumps in the road to the hoped-for bright future, he didn't expect anything of this scale. As for Albon, he was vocally frustrated by car problems in China, and in Japan, he believed his complaints were not being taken seriously when it came to the power unit deployment not working as expected, despite adapting his driving based on suggestions from the engineering team. Both could be potential targets for other teams. To lose either would be a blow, but if Sainz in particular were to leave, it would signal a lack of confidence in Williams' long-term prospects, given how important his recruitment was seen as by Vowles. But he and Albon will both be trying to understand whether this is just a temporary setback or symptomatic of bigger problems. The priority for Williams is to prove that it can quickly get back to the front of the midfield. Inevitably, Vowles has faced criticism for the team's plight. Given he had plenty of praise heaped on him for the progress made since he joined as team principal in February 2023, that comes with the territory. He's taken responsibility for what he frames as the failure to achieve the output, so building the car, by not scaling up the business in the right way. That doesn't mean that he's a weak link that should be axed, however. Progress is rarely linear. In a sporting challenge as complex as F1, doubly so. While it's common to chop and change managers in football, this rarely solves problems or leads to long-term changes. Vowles still has credit in the bank given the job he's done at Williams, and it would be nonsensical simply to blame him and push him out the door. Taking responsibility doesn't necessarily mean the axe falling. However, that's not to say there aren't concerns. The problems at the start of this year have eerie similarities to those of early 2024 and should not have happened. This is therefore a test of Vowles, not just in terms of recovering this year, but also getting back to where Williams should be in 2027. There are many reasons you might want to sack a team boss, but having a poor season is not in isolation one of them. After all, should McLaren have axed Andrea Stella when it made a disappointing start to 2024? While McLaren still started that year capable of top 6 finishes, it too was seen as a team on the up that hadn't started a year as a race-winning threat, and some could have taken that as proof the team wasn't on a trajectory to the top. The recovery starts in Miami for Williams, which needs to add to its paltry haul of 2 World Championship points soon. Speaking during the season-opening Australian Grand Prix weekend, Vowles said Williams is still aiming for 5th in the championship. However, he also accepted that the mountain it had to climb was enormous. But it is possible if Williams gains relative to the mid-pack and starts to score regularly, closing what is a very small points gap of just 18 to midfield leader Haas is achievable. The key question is whether this is just, as Sainz put it, one of those inevitable bumps in the road Williams had to hit and its big picture trajectory will continue to point upwards, or a sign of deeper troubles. Sainz suggests that if hitting these problems will allow Williams to kill the little viruses in the team, then in the longer term it would lead to a big jump forward. Having a bad season is never a good thing for an F1 team, and 2026 has been a blow to Williams' ambitions. But the old aphorism about learning the most in adversity and failure applies. It's now down to Williams to prove that right, and that's the biggest test it has faced in the James Vowles era. It could also be the defining one.